This conference will now be recorded.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, every year July 1st, they make some kind of updates to the forms. We're just going to look at 2T today because there's a few minor changes and then one change that I think is going to possibly give some people some heartburn. Now, of course, you can find all of these on the NC Realtors website. You can find all the commentary on why changes were made. You can find the marked up contracts where, of course, anything in yellow has been changed. If it's struck through, it was removed. If it's in bold, it was added. So just here at the beginning, they've replaced the paragraph about manufactured homes with it can include a manufactured home or an offsite or separate septic, boat slip, garage, parking space, or storage unit. I'd imagine particularly around Asheville at some of the lakes, probably those offsite boat slips might be something that are common, or potentially probably some offsite septic if a home is maybe built in an area where it's not conducive to on-site. So you want to just make sure you're aware of those, and they've added a note here that if any of those are included in the sale, you may want to attach that additional provisions addendum and make sure that it's properly addressed. Just very minor clarification here that the due diligence fee should be payable and delivered to the seller on the effective date. I guess by the effective date implied that it could be delivered before the effective date, and no one I would never let anyone do that. So just minor clarification there. And they basically just said that by default, earnest money is due within 5 days. Believe you previously had the option to make it due immediately. It's just all of them are due within 5 days now. Actually, they highlighted this and didn't even change it. That still says 2022 on here, but I'm sure by the time they get you the real forms, it will say 23. Slight clarification here that if a due diligence check bounces and the seller incurs costs from their own bank, that the seller does have the right to seek that money from the buyer as well. And now you're going to see this added more than once in the contract, and hopefully you remember it was in the update course, not the period that just ended, but the year before that, the 2021-2022 period. Actually, this one's about the electronic transfer. So basically, if up here the seller agrees that they will accept a wire transfer or electronic transfer, they can't accept an offer with electronic transfer and then say, whoops, I don't have Venmo, you're in breach because I don't have the money. They're saying if you agree to receive the money via electronic transfer, you have to ensure that you have a way to receive it. Really just simplifying language, which is really rare for a contract, so kind of nice to see. Just making it more simple. The earnest money deposit will be credited to buyer at closing or dispersed as required by this contract. This is what I was thinking of. The parties further acknowledge that the effectiveness of this contract is not contingent on buyer's payment of any earnest money deposit or due diligence fee. And of course, referencing paragraph 1D, which we just saw up here for the seller's rights if it is not delivered. And in case maybe that's not familiar, you should know we have a form, I believe it's 355T. If a buyer has failed to deliver either the earnest money or the due diligence, you must give them written demand. Buyer shall have 1 banking day after written notice to deliver cash, bank check, wire transfer, electronic transfer to the payee. If they don't do that within 1 day, then the seller shall have the right to terminate the contract. But it is still a contract. Not paying the due diligence fee does not make it not a contract. So you're going to see that here, and I believe it comes up again towards the end of 2T again. Just adding here that exercise equipment, if it's permanently affixed, it is a fixture. Little change here, the seller must repair any damage. So this is identified items that would normally be fixtures, but you are agreeing in the contract that the seller is going to remove them and take them they do not convey. This is really clarifying that the seller must repair any damage caused by removing those items. And then further clarifying it must be in a good and workmanlike manner, similar language that you see in the due diligence repair request. And that the seller will notify the buyer when those repairs are complete and provide any documentation if they have any. And just a note suggesting that if you know the seller is going to remove something and they want a repair to be done a specific way, you can request it, again, using the additional provisions addendum. Zoning, governmental compliance, just including that a buyer can investigate whether a property is in violation of any law, ordinance, permit, or government regulation as outlined in paragraph 8H, which we will, of course, get to here in a minute. Nothing much on these pages has changed. Just a clarification here that if a home was built prior to 1978 and you do not provide the lead-based paint addendum, that a buyer may not be obligated to complete the purchase. So you want to make sure that you are providing that upfront before they go under contract. They've just added a paragraph here. The property is or is not subject to any leases. Again, recommending either the additional provisions addendum or the vacation rental addendum, depending on what type of lease the seller may have in place. And they've just changed this from affidavit to certification. This is related to the Foreign Investment and Real Estate Property Tax Act, the FIRPTA. Basically, it only applies if your seller is not a U.S. citizen. Does come up occasionally. If it does, honestly, you just want to talk to the closing attorney and make sure they have everything in order. So this is meant to clarify that only material defects with the title would cause a buyer to have the right to terminate. So if there's some non-material defect that does not prevent the seller from conveying clear title, you will you don't have the right to terminate over that. Like, it's got to be something material that prevents providing marketable title.
Do you have any examples of non-material title things?
Well, so actually the example here in their comments was only needs to convey the property free of any material encumbrances. The existing language had no such qualifier. So the example they used is a 6-inch fence encroachment on a small corner of the property, that as long as that does not prevent the seller from delivering marketable and insurable title, a small defect like that would not be enough for a buyer to terminate and claim seller breach. And then here's the big one. This is the one that's got a lot of agents sort of worked up. It is a condition of this contract that the property be conveyed free of any material violation of law, ordinance, permit, or government regulation. So unless the seller has specifically disclosed it prior to the effective date. So this is where that unpermitted addition, if it's not disclosed that it's not permitted and the buyer discovers it during their due diligence, the seller does have the right to cure the violation if they can. You know, if it's something where they can go back and get it permitted after the fact and they can get that done, by the closing date or the closing date plus the 7-day grace period, then you're good. The contract is still valid. But if the seller is unable to cure a violation, whether it's missing a permit, whether it's being, used in a manner that's not approved by the current zoning, impervious surface, if they went back and installed a great big concrete patio that's covering 90% of the backyard, and they're now violating the impervious surface requirements, the buyer has the opportunity to terminate and get a refund of their earnest money and due diligence fee. So this is going to be one where it's really important that you check for permits now, because this can be an easy out for buyers. Things that we obviously don't often think about. Replacing a water heater in most places can require technically a permit to be pulled, and I don't think most people do it. So you're going to want to make sure that you're really checking the county records or the town records, whoever keeps it in that particular jurisdiction, for permits. And if you cannot find a permit, you want to make sure you're disclosing everything up front. Because as long as you disclose that there's no permit and the buyer goes under contract anyway, you're all good. It doesn't matter at that point. But yes, you're going to want to be very careful with permitting going forward.
Do you think we could have a future training meeting or whatever that could maybe go over what needs to be permitted and things that don't need to be permitted? Like electrical items that doesn't need to have a permit, or plumbing things. I don't know if we could have a training on that.
We're trying to figure out, we've been talking about that here, who is the best person? Is it someone at the county? Is it, I don't know, a general contractor? Yeah, we've been trying to figure out who the best person is to maybe come in and talk about the permitting process, how to know what should or should not have them. Yeah, exactly what you're asking. We've been discussing that and trying to figure out who that person is that can be the expert. But yeah, we'll try and work on getting something like that put together here soon.
Great.
This one, very minor change. They're basically just saying that unless you insert a name here under other, it's essentially going to be deeded to whoever's named on the first page here. Now, of course, in practice, I think we all know the attorneys send out that information sheet, the buyers fill it out, and the buyers tell them how they want the deed to be recorded then anyway. This blank, I'm sure they feel like they need to have it here, but I've always felt like it never got used anyway, because you send a copy of the contract to the attorney and they still say, hey, how do the buyers want the deed made? They're not looking at this anyway. But if you want it to be made out to someone other than the buyer, you'll need to insert that name here. And just clarifying that possession includes all means of access, which include transferable amenities and services. So, if there's a key fob to get into the community pool, if there's a mailbox key, anything like that, all of those are included. That is part of possession of the property, that you have access to all areas, all amenities that an owner would be entitled to access. Again, just clarifying the possession is subject to rights of tenants. Parties should attach one of the two relevant addenda. They've replaced a note that said they should consider attaching it to be a little bit more clear that, yeah, you should go ahead and use it. This one was interesting. We asked for clarification on this. Apparently, there have been cases where a buyer wasn't happy. Maybe they didn't get the repairs they wanted. They thought the seller was in breach and the seller disagreed, whatever. They were actually going to the county and recording this contract for the specific purpose of placing a cloud on the title so that the seller could not go out and sell to someone else. So this is just clarifying that you cannot do that. And that's, don't ask me for an example. I'm unaware that that has ever happened in any of the transactions here at Fathom, but obviously it happened enough times that they felt they needed to add it here to the contract, that this cannot be recorded without written consent from both parties. And this is just clarifying that if the buyer breaches, the seller, yes, they receive the liquidated damages, which are the earnest money deposit and the due diligence fee, but that they also have the rights to recover, any cost from dishonored funds. If a check bounces and they incur a fee from their lender, that yes, seller is entitled to get that money back too. They are not strictly limited to just the earnest money and due diligence. And again, just another reference to dishonored funds, that they can get that in addition to the attorney fees. And then again, I mentioned it would come up again, this offer shall become a binding contract on the effective date, unless specifically provided otherwise. Buyer's failure to timely deliver any fee, deposit, or other payment shall not prevent this offer from becoming a binding contract. So again, they've added in here twice. It was in our update course the year before last. It's been a big issue. In fact, if you saw, I think not last month's bulletin, the one from May, there were 2 agents being disciplined because they had not received the due diligence fee, advised their seller that they were not under contract. The seller took a second offer, accepted it. That first buyer had never been terminated properly. I believe that is it for this form. Any questions about these changes? If not, I'm going to stop the recording.